Right, so as we mentioned, Matrix Submerged is back, and today we've come to where it all pretty much first started. For me, this was my first ever Submerged that we did with Rob Hughes back in, I'm going to say 2021. You having that? Around then. It's been out quite a while, and that one we sort of just touched. We were very much just starting to feel our way into the underwater world, and we didn't quite know what we were doing, but we were just touching on accuracy when it comes to my fishing, and on the day it was micros and messing about a little bit with accuracy with how I feed, that sort of thing. Today, however, I want to go a lot more in depth with the way I think about things. I mean, the reason I use certain rigs, depending how I'm feeding, all the little fiddly things that I believe make a difference. So what I want to do is talk about accuracy, bite detection, the fall of my bait, how your feed can impart on the way fish behave, all those sort of little things. Unfortunately, we can't get any fish involved. There aren't that many in here, they're just very large ones. But yeah, I want to talk about all the little fiddly things that I believe for me make a massive, massive difference in putting a few fish in the net and using the correct shotting, correct style of rigs for the correct ways of feeding. That's going to be the key thing that I want you lot to take from this video. So without further ado, the lads are getting in the water. I'm going to go straight on with how I'd start a match and how I want to kick things off to make sure I make the uttermost of my peg when there aren't too many fish feeding at the start of the session. Right, so getting straight into it, and I want to talk first about how I'd start the majority of my matches and the way I'd start a pellet peg in very, very normal carp style venues where you start short, venues like Larford, Hayfield, all those places where you're looking at catching 2 or 3 early sort of mugfish that are sitting on the bottom on that short line. Massively popular way of starting. This is how I want to start it when, if anything, I've not got many fish in my peg. It's about setting traps, being patient, catching a fish. And that's what I want to talk about with this first one, is how I want to get me bait and all of that, but that's in a second. First up is the style of rig, the style of shotting. So that's the key thing I want you to take from this, is how the shotting looks for each way that I'm feeding, as I said at the start. So my standard way, this is me, it's my trap setting way, where I'm not looking at catching massive numbers of fish. I'm often faced with a bit of a slopey bottom. I mean, it's not really flat and even. There's often depressions, it's often dropping off, it's often on the slope. And it's a rig that I just want stability out of. I want stability, and I want my bites to show up as cleanly as possible, and I also want my bite detection to be as good as it possibly can, just so I know what's going on. So in today's case, the peg that we're fishing, lovely, nice and short. We've needed to do that to find a nice clean spot. I've got a positive float on a 0.4 in this case that takes quite a bit of shot, which is what I want. I want that stability. So how I have it shotted, either with a 0.4 or a 0.6, it is big, heavy shot. So in this 0.4's case, it is literally number 9s, and you can see my first number 9, if I bring it up here so you can see them a bit better, my first number 9 is actually on my 4-inch hook length. Yeah, great big thing for me, that is putting the shot on my hook length, because I hate these loops opening up, kicking off, whatever, and I believe that tiny, tiny little bit of weight just helps straighten my loops and keeps that nice fluent movement through my rig, so it's nice and straight with no kicky off hinge points. So my first shot there on my 4-inch hook length, got a decent hook on, but all that's irrelevant today. This is just about the presentation. That all needs to be suited to the size of fish, size of bait, all of that. But my first shot, as I say, 0.4 float, number 9 on top of my hook length. And then I have a nice, really steady taper of number 9s above that. But it's proportional to the depth, so it's all in the bottom quarter of my rig, to possibly to the bottom third if I went really deep. But in this case, 3.5 foot, bottom quarter of my rig, and I've got a 2-inch gap, an 1.5 gap, an 1.5 gap, an inch gap, just slightly under an inch gap, all with number 9s. Yeah, one style of shot all the way through. There is no sexiness to this rig in the fall of my bait. The fall of the bait is completely irrelevant. I'm looking at feeding in a way that puts my bait straight on the bottom. There is very, very little bait going to be falling through the water, and only for a very short amount of time. So it's all about getting my bait over that trap. But for big fish, for small numbers of fish, I'm never going to have hordes of chaos of small fish in my peg that I've got a different rig for that we'll show you later. This is, as I say, that 1 or 2 nice bonus fish in that short line to get you off to a great start. Also for later on when there's a few more fish feeding, but again, the emphasis is not too many fish in my peg, nice and steady. Because what I'm trying to achieve, that we'll see under the water, is a lovely curve on my rig that allows my bait to be incorporated sort of into my shotting, shows up lovely on my bristle, my bait, because I'm using a big heavy sinkable bait. I mean, big 6 or 8 mil pellet's going to anchor it lovely, show up on my bristle, but as well it's great bite detection because I've got that first shot so close to my bait. So it's probably, what, 3 3/4 inches away. And I've got my bait incorporated into my shot in. It makes the perfect trap setting rig. So everything is sat there as tight, as lovely as it possibly can, and it's going to show me both brilliant magnified bites, but also show me any indications telling me that there's fish in my peg. So what I want to do quickly though, before we start off with any bait going in and demonstrating how the rig sits when it's on the bottom, is plumbing up. So for this, you can't have it perfectly dead depth, because I want that slight curve to happen in the rig. For it to sit nicely, I need to plumb up correctly. So by whizzing out, this is all properly blue petered, ready to go. I found my spot on a nice little gravel patch that we've got out there, and you can see I'm plumbing to the middle of my body. Yeah, I've spoke about this loads and loads and loads, middle to bottom of the body of the float. You can see that, absolutely perfect. Yeah, obviously that's going to be shotted a lot lower. See when that goes down, get that bit of duckweed out the way. Shotted a lot lower, so I've got that allowance in my rig sort of thing that I can pull it to the side this way using a back shot, and you can see it all tightens up, stays lovely, keeps my bait exactly where I want it, but shows up any movements on that bristle as well. But don't want to talk about that yet. I'll show you that when I've got the bait on and we're ready to go. But yeah, plumbing up, keep things nice and simple, have that little bit of allowance, and that'll ensure I get perfect presentation with my rig. So plumbed up, all sexy, all as perfect as I want it to be. And unfortunately, we're not going to catch no fish, but what I want you to do, what I want to show you first, is how my rig looks on the bottom and how I need to lay it in. So I'm going to put standard 6mm pellet on. So there's no bait on the bottom. I'm not going to feed anything in this cast, so it should stand out nicely on the camera for you lot to see. And what I'm after is showing how I need to keep my rig tight. So what I'll have done at this point, I've plumbed up, and if I'm fishing a match as well, I'd have put my rig in because I want to see which way the water's moving. Or, depends what's happening on the bottom. Yeah, in today's case, the water's been nice and still. I've got no movement. But if there was any movement, I always want to lay it up the movement. Yeah, if there's tow, I want to lay it up tow. If the wind's being the most prevalent force, I want to lay it upwind. Yeah, it creates that curve for me, which you'll see when my pellet's on the bottom. But today I've got none. It's nice and still today. I can dictate where it goes. But the way I've plumbed up, I don't know how it'll show for you on the camera, but for me, it's slightly deeper to the left of the camera than it is to the right of the camera. It'd be the opposite then, won't it? I think, I don't know, but one of the pegs is it's a slight slope going from right to left in my case. So what I want to do is make sure that my rig is always going up the slope. Yeah, I want to lay it down the slope and pull my rig into the slope. So it's going to keep it nice and still. So I'm going to whiz my rig out. I'm just going to hold it nice. Yeah, I'm not flicking it out or anything. In today's case, I'm just dropping it nice because I've got to dodge a little bit of duckweed. And if I've just got to put it in the right place, so you can see I've swung it out, and before it touches the bottom, I put my rig in. Yeah, because I don't want it to land, watch this duckweed, I don't want it to land in a straight line. Yeah, I don't want to hold it up so it all gets vertical and then drop it in. I want to put my rig in just before. Let me do it again, just because I've been waffling a bit. Dodge the duckweed. So you can see there, just holding onto it, and just before it hits the bottom, I put my float in. Yeah, now I sink my back shot, and then I pull on it. So I hold that lovely and tight and see how stable my rig is. My rig literally does not budge. It holds exactly where I want it to because it's holding against the slope in this case. Yeah, if the water was moving a certain way and pulling my float out, my back shot and everything, I'd be holding it up and keeping it in place. Yeah, I want the water to help me, which it sort of is now to be fair. It's slightly moving to my right, so it's helping my float push over to my right. So I can just hold it. I'm going to lay that in again just in case it's moved off the shot for you lot. You can see I plonk my rig in, put it in just before, got a bit of weed around my float, but don't worry about that, and then pull it tight. And I know now that with the allowance that I created when I plumbed up, I've got a lovely curve in my rig. So there's still no line lay on the bottom or anything. My pellet will be lovely, nice and tight, all direct to my bristle. So as soon as anything touches it, I'm going to show it up. Yeah, just by holding it nice and tight on that back shot, just submerging, that's the one, that back shot, I'm able to just pull on it, keep it all lovely and tight. It gives myself the best chance of showing up a bite as magnified as I possibly can, because whenever a fish pulls on that pellet, it's going to give it a big magnified movement with the shot, the pellet, everything else. And also, I'm keeping things as utter stable and as perfect as I possibly can. I'm not a big fan of wafty about rigs, lifting and dropping. This is a rig I want to put in over my pile, which is what we're going to talk about next. and keep everything as sexy as it possibly can be to give myself a chance of catching that fish when it comes into my peg. Everything needs to be as accurate and as perfect as possible, which hopefully that shows.
And that it did. Every time we tried this experiment, Jamie's hook bait's anchored on the bottom, the shotting pattern creates a lovely curve in the rig, and plumbing up to the bottom of the body of the float achieves this brilliantly, every single time. Now we've seen the rig, let's move on to how we put it into practice when feeding.
So everything sorted, you've seen how I want my rig to be set to keep things as good as they can possibly be. The last few little things that I want to pay attention to is my feed itself going in. I mean, you'd think it doesn't make any difference, but of course it does. I mean, you've not got these big numbers of fish coming into your peg to move about all over your peg. You want the sexiest trap as possible, keeping things really, really tight to keep things accurate. And all little things can play into their hands to make sure it is done in the best way possible. So firstly, my pellets. Yeah, in this case, we're feeding some 6s. So what I want to do is get rid of any anomalies, any big, strange shaped ones. And you can see I've got a tub of water next to me, give them a quick dunk, and I'm going to put them in my pot without a lid on. So I've taken the lid completely off that, and it's just a loose pot now that the pellets are going to leave a lot cleaner, a lot easier. Yeah, lids can be great when I'm sprinkling bait in, but when I want them to be as accurate as possible, it just makes that 1% difference, and that is what it is all about. So you can see, put my rig in, ready to go. It'd be nice if a big 20-pounder comes up and mops these pellets up. But what I'm after, me routine, so to speak, of getting my bait in, is get rid of my rig. So my rig's there, out the way, and literally I pay so much attention to getting them first lot of pellets in with no noise whatsoever. Just going to pause for a sec with that wind. So I'm just putting my pot all the way to the water and tipping them pellets out. And it just makes that ever so slight bit of difference as opposed to shaking them out to the accuracy that I can keep. Yeah, in turn that'll create a really, really tightly grouped amount of pellets on the bottom. Even if they've got to sink in 4, 5, 6 foot of water, they keep everything as tight as possible. So those fish, it's all going to be condensed, so there's as much chance as possible of them finding my bait. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's so many other things that need to be incorporated into it, such as noise, sprinkling pellets to attract the fish in. That may need to be done later on. But at first, I want to put that pile in and see what happens. I've spoken about this a million times throughout the past. It's about just having them little steps to ensure you don't mess things up by making noise when you don't need to make noise when there's already a fish present. And by doing it in that way, that gives me the best chance of getting a bite. So, of course, once I've got to that step and nothing's happened, it may be that I have to throw the odd pellet, just the odd single 1s and 2 pellets thrown at my float. Can be great for attracting fish. And if I can't maintain accuracy by throwing or catapulting, then replicating that on my pot, putting the lid on my pot, just shaking the 3 pellets in, that again can attract fish brilliantly into my peg, but at the detriment of the accuracy of my pile. I mean, no matter how good I am throwing, or even with a pot, I can't quite replicate the pile that I can create by sneaking my pellets in a lovely way with no lid on the pot, by wetting my pellets to make them go down really, really quickly. It's those little things that does make a big, big difference in catching that 1 or 2 early fish on that short line. So that's the way I do things for big fish, nice and patient. Next, I want to move on to loose feeding. What I'm going to do when there's a lot more fish in my peg, what I may do when I'm fishing longer, which I can't do in this case, there's a bit too much weed, so everything's going to be done short. But how I want to catch fish when they're feeding through baits that are sinking through the water, when they're moving through my peg a lot more freely, and often when the fish are a bit smaller. So that's the next step, and what we're going to do with slightly smaller pellets on the drop.
When Jamie cups his pellets in, the toe in the top couple of inches of water has moved his pellets to the right. You can see Jamie's hookbait is bang in line with the pole marker in the swim. His loose feed has actually landed slightly to the right of where he's fishing. It's virtually impossible to know just how far your pellets are actually landing, but his hookbait is right on the edge of his feed. I don't think that's too bad. I think that's definitely going to get you a bite.
So with me, what am I going to call it? My trap rig sort of covered for when I'm being really patient. My next step that I may need to use at a different venue or a different point in time throughout the day when lots more fish come into my peg is a rig that's through the water. I mean, I tend to use this rig a lot, sort of now onwards, when it starts getting colder, September, October, when the fish are feeding, say really freely because I'm loose feeding, or on sight. Sight becomes a big thing. Once the clarity drops a little bit and they're watching things, this is when I want to move on to what we used to call girly rigs. Really, really slow falling, lightly shotted rigs that can make a massive difference when fish are not troughing, they're a bit spooky. I mean, they're watching what's going on. They're watching those pellets descend through the water. This is where it comes into it. And it's a massive, massive rig in my armoury on those days when you've got to eke it out. You've got to catch as many fish as you possibly can when they're being moody. And this one, as it says, is really, really, really delicate. Again, not going to talk about hook lengths and all of that materials, doesn't matter. But in this case, I've got a 4-inch hook length again. This one, I put my first shot above my hook length. Yeah, I'm not bothered about it all tightening up because I haven't got that stability, that's the word. I'm not creating the magnification that I keep talking about, the stability. I'm not sitting over a really tight trap. In this case, I'm loose feeding, so those fish are going to be moving about throughout my peg a lot more erratically than they would if they were feeding on a really tight pile. I mean, I'm loose feeding because they're going to be picking those bits of bait up all over the place, plus there's potential for the fish to come off the bottom and intercept the bait as well. So they really are, they're whizzing through my peg. So I've not got to worry about the fish only moving an inch to the next pellet and not showing a bite up, because the likelihood is they're going to be racing 6, 8, 10 inches away, and they're going to be moving my bait a lot better to move my float to show the bite up a little bit better. So, as I say, first one just above my 4-inch hook length. Yeah, that's number 11. So it doesn't part much weight at all on that pellet sinking. Makes my pellet sink as naturally as it pretty much possibly can. Another number 11, probably 8 inches above that, and then a couple of number 10s. So even in 4 foot of water, which we've got now, or just under 4 foot, I've got a 0.2 float, 0.2 carbon stem, really, really important, always a carbon stem for fishing through the water. And all I'm taking, as I say, is 2 number 10s, 2 number 11s. Really, really light, faffy abouty float that has no, as I say, stability when it goes in. It really is a through the watery thing, but massive for catching them clever fish, especially if the wind allows. Right, so what I'm going to do, again, no fishing involved, I'm going to put a 6mm pellet on again, just for visibility purposes. I'll often say that when I'm doing this, when I want to fish through the water, 4s are often my choice. Just sink a little bit slower, a little bit sexier, and it's probably because you're after a mix of F1s and carp when you're fishing in this way. So just to show it up on the camera a bit easier, we'll go for a 6 today. And like I said, zero stability in this rig. It's going to waft about all over the place, but it's the descent of the pellet that's the important bit. But everything that I said on the first rig, it's portrayed the same on this, in that I plumbed up exactly the same, just to the middle of the body. I'm still paying attention in exactly the same way as to the way the water's moving. So in today's case, slightly to the right, but not really. And that's how I want to lay my rig in. So all I'm going to be doing is literally lay my rig in a lovely straight line, right over my spot. My float's actually going to sit on my spot. So literally I'll flick it out in the way that the water's, upwind of the way the water's moving. Just check that flow, hold it tight, and you can see it sinks on a lovely, lovely, lovely tight line. And if I'm nice and patient with it, so I can get that to go all the way down and sit absolutely perfectly. I should have checked the shotting on this float there. So that's all right. In fact, that's that nice. You can see I followed that all the way down, but my float's going to be wafty about. It's going to get moved by any wind, any fish. It's not going to be as stable as the one with a load of lead down it. But what this is a very active sort of rig, if you like, that I'm going to lay that rig in just like that, probably every 30 seconds. My rig's very, very rarely going to be still in the water. It's almost like dobbing, in that you're just putting that rig in constantly, 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 trying to get those fish's attention.
I thought it'd be really good to show you the top side and how to lay the rig in before we looked at the rig underwater. Here you can see the rig falls considerably slower with this shotting pattern to the previous rig. The hook bait really flutters down, and as you can see, when it reaches the bottom, it does move slightly along the bottom. This has got less stability than the other rig, but still enough to get you a bite. This was really interesting. The loops created between the hook bait and Jamie's shot. Is this the line diameter? Maybe that's a test for another day. The rig falls nice and slowly through the water, hopefully mimicking a pellet that you're going to loose feed.
And the second thing I want to do is try and match it to my loose feed. Got a bit of weed on that. So what I want to try and do is feed at a certain time, work out how long my feed's going to take. That with a 6mm, it's normally about 3 seconds a foot-ish. depending on your pellets, but don't take my word for that. So what I want to do is feed my bait, just give that a couple of seconds, then I want to put my rig on top of it. And what you'll find is in the important bit, in the last like 2 foot of water, if you like, that's when they're all going to marry up together and my bait's going to be sinking at roughly the same time as those other baits that have just gone in. So it's not going to be exact, the fish aren't fussy. They just get the excitement of those initial baits coming in, and if my bait can sort of blend into them, I am happy, job is a good one.
Just look at Jamie's rig here. Try and pick out the hook bait. Here it is. You can see it's actually falling slightly slower than the loose fed pellets. This makes it really natural and I'm sure increases your chances of a bite. With this rig we're looking at getting a bite as the pellet just hits the bottom as the rigs settle in. You can see here the spread of pellets fed by hand is much wider than the pellets that we fed earlier via the pot.
So that's all it's about. So there's not much more to this rig. It's just simply a case of whenever I'm loose feeding, whenever I'm making noise, which in turn is going to attract fish because of that plop, plop, plop on the water. Also because of the increased spread of my pellets, which is going to happen literally because I'm cattying or I'm throwing. It's naturally going to spread. This is the rig that I'm going to pick up every single time to catch them moody fish that are going through the water. So there's not a lot to this. So the key thing that I want you to see on the underwater camera itself is just that fall of the bait, just how nicely it falls through the water, marrying in with the other baits that have gone in. So a really great one for catching fish on the moody days, this one.
You can see when it falls through the water, it's difficult to pick out which one is actually the hook bait. There it is, just about to hit the bottom now. This one lands in some weed. Fortunately, not a problem we have when fishing commercials, but you can see it really does blend in with the rest of the pellets that are on the bottom. It's a real nice spread of pellets and the fish are going to be moving around searching for different pellets, hopefully picking out your hook bait amongst them.
Right, so my first 2 pellet rigs they're my standard hard pellet rigs that I'm going to use whenever I'm fishing on the bottom during the summer months. The only other rig I may use during the summer months is when it's a really busy little fish soft pellet approach. They're a little bit different to the standard spread out, very, very delicate winter type pellet approach. During the summer, it's normally fast and furious. So what it's all about is getting that bait down as fast as I possibly can when I'm fishing in 3 foot plus, if I need to use expanders still, with a very, very, very robust zero finesse, if I'm honest, rig. And it just literally comes down to a bulk. I mean, as simple as it possibly gets. For me, when I'm fishing expanders in the summer, it's about being really positive, really fast, getting lots of bites. I mean, there's no need for nice, slow falling rigs looking pretty on the bottom. All this rig is simply going to do, you can see by the shot in, is get it down as fast as it physically possibly can in 4 foot, or 3.5 foot like we've got here, and also the utter maximum in bite magnification. Yeah, as soon as that fish moves 3 inches, it's dislodging a bulk of 6 number 9s in this case, which, I mean, it doesn't get any better for showing bites up. It's just about being fast, speedy, getting the bait down quickly as possible and catching a fish. And yeah, as the name suggests, that's how it's going to be, a really, really no nonsense type rig. So this one with expanders, I've got my standard type of expander on. All that pretty much I need to show you with this is the accuracy sort of thing. So once again, plumbed up exactly the same, plumbed up to the middle of my body, no messing about. Don't need to have any line on the bottom of this one. It's trying to keep that straight line between my bulk and the expander. So if anything, I may plumb up slightly less, maybe just onto the top side of my body on this one. And all it's a case of is practicing to make sure everything's as accurate as possible. So the way I'm going to feed me micros with this, it's always going to be in a ball, just as we did last time on the first video that we filmed at this venue with Rob. And what I'm after is a ball that's not too tight, because in an ideal world, I want that to break up just before it gets to the bottom. I want that to start exploding so the fish can start attacking it, just to give me a lovely window of sort of 4 to 6 inch little plate, if you like, on the bottom that it's going to get down, present my expander beautifully over the top as close as I possibly can. Should really have done this with an extra pole roller, but we haven't, so never mind. So literally it's a case of shipping out with this and being accurate. Now, I spoke about this before, having as many points as you possibly can to maintain accuracy. So with this one, we moved to a different spot now just because the other one was getting a little bit messy. And there's so many different things that I have to keep myself accurate. You know, firstly, far bank marker, first thing you're going to pick. And when it comes to choosing far bank markers, choose small. Yeah, the smaller the far back marker, the more accurate you're going to be. So I've picked right on the edge of a weed bed, really, really accurate. I'm not picking a great big bush or a tree. Literal, the change of colour in the weed bed I'm picking. Secondly, where my feet are makes a big difference on my box. Yeah, if I sit all the way back here, I'm losing length that way. So I'm always sat in this case, because I'm fishing that way, with my left leg just touching my side tray. And I know that as long as my legs are touching, I'm on the join of my pole, just past it in this case where I've gone. So I'm just touching, you can see here, the join of my pole. I'm putting that lovely pile in there as accurate as I possibly can. I'm plonking my rig over the top. And having as many different points of contact as you can to maintain that accuracy. Taking time to put your bait in as well. So be it in ball form or putting it in loose, whatever the depth dictates. It just means that I'm as accurate as I possibly can. And you can see with that rig under the water, it almost doesn't matter which way I put my rig in. I can lay it in from any angle of my peg. There's no anchorage of my bait. I've got an expander on. It's not going to hold my bait in place. It's just a case of getting that bulk right over the top of my loose feed that I've just put in, keeping them as accurate as possible and showing them bite up as soon as the fish takes the bait, which with little fish that are very, very greedy attacking that pile, it just naturally happens. So a lovely way of catching really, really fast when it comes to fishing soft pellets. Not something I do very often at all, but it's the way I fish them in the summer. If I went somewhere like Barston catching lots and lots of skimmers, this is the way I'd be doing it, nice and quick. So hopefully that covers pretty much everything. So you've seen how I'd like to start things off when I'm being patient with pellets, how I'm going to fish through the water with pellets, and then as I say with this one, a nice little touch on how I'm going to fish soft pellets during the summer months when fishing's really good. Obviously there is a massive amount of other things that we can touch on when it comes to fishing shallow over the same lines, all that sort of thing. I mean, we can go on with this sort of thing forever, and it's what we will definitely cover in later issues of Submerged. But I think that's about it now. I'm going to get these rigs wrapped up and we'll have a nice chat with Adam, who's been in the water, he's freezing cold, getting himself nice and warm with a cup of tea, and we'll see just how he's thought of things and almost how it proves my fishing and the key things that we've learned from today. Right, all done, out the water. A little bit chilly, or you're all right?
Warming up a little bit now,
Oh, yeah.
warming up a little bit now. No, it was good. It was very nice to see.
It's different, isn't it?
The reason we're doing these videos is we make videos, we put videos out every week of tactics and things to improve, but we really want to use this underwater element to show people exactly why we're doing these videos, why we're filming these videos. You can see from what you've just watched, Jamie's done a video on this similar subject last year about feeding, and you'll see exactly why he's saying what he is. It's not just doing it for fun or to make some random content. Right? It
Hopefully
makes a
that
difference.
is happening, what we say is happening,
and
with a bit of
we
luck.
can see. So,
No.
no, it's been good.
It's a lovely one. The key thing for me, we always have a learning point in these.
Yeah.
From today, I was amazed how much it moves in that top foot of water.
Yeah.
Like we fed some bait and it was crazy. It'd move and then it would sink, wouldn't it? So the top water of the movement often dictates where your bait goes.
Definitely.
And you'd never know.
No, you can see that I've noticed today. Like this is the first time we've done a proper underwater filming trip.
Yeah.
Done a little bit of diving now, and you can see even the bits, the particles in the water, they move more on the surface, much more on the surface than they do further down. They're much slower.
Yeah,
Everything's
even on a
very
day with
slow.
no wind today,
Yeah.
hasn't it? But right interesting. But hopefully you lot have enjoyed that. What we'd also like you to do is comment with any methods you'd like us to cover. Isn't it? We can get some rivers, some lakes, who knows, as long as you can think of a good method and ideally a perfectly clear venue to do it on as well, will be much appreciated and we will do it. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the latest edition of Matrix Submerged, and we will be back with another one very, very soon.
Definitely. And make sure you don't miss it. Hit the like button on this video, hit subscribe, and then you'll make sure you don't miss the next video.